Hey guys, welcome to the analysis for March 22nd. It is a little after 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here, and as we always do on Fridays, I'm going to be covering the weekly charts today, give you a little longer term view of the market. But before we actually get into the analysis, I just want to cover a few notes here. The first one is that I wanted to make sure that you guys are aware that we have a Facebook page that we're posting content and things on. So we have a lot of subscribers, but not a ton of Facebook fans. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put that link below. Don't feel any pressure, but if you want to follow us on Facebook and you use Facebook on any kind of regular basis, it's a great way to get some of the stuff that we're publishing and communication and stuff like that. So make sure to hit that if you do use Facebook and would like to get access to that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that I wanted to apologize because yesterday I actually sent an email out to all of our daily analysis subscribers that was not meant for that group. It was meant for our mentor group, so it was an invite to a private call, and I accidentally sent it out to all the people on the daily analysis group. So if you got that email and were confused or inconvenienced, I really apologize. Just a dumb mistake on my part, so please forgive me on that. Okay, and the last thing is what I asked about yesterday, and if you're not aware of kind of the conversation I had yesterday in the daily analysis about changing the way we do the setup, just go to the blog and check out yesterday's daily analysis, and it'll make sense to you. But I got a ton of feedback, and I just want to thank you guys all so much for your feedback. More feedback than I've ever gotten on a daily analysis video, so really excited about that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the form to an extent, like I mentioned, but I'm still going to be covering all the major currencies, even if they're not doing anything exciting, because I had a few comments of people who really did want to still go over that. So the format will be that I'll cover the immediate trade setups or the high potential trade setups first, try to go over those in some detail, and then I'll kind of dismiss the people who don't want to go over the monotonous pairs, and then the last few minutes of the daily analysis I'll cover all the major pairs regardless of if there's trade setups or not. So got a couple great ideas like that from the people who commented, so I want to thank Paul, especially. Paul gave me that idea. Pretty much I'm doing exactly what he suggested, so thank you, Paul, for leaving that feedback. I really appreciate it. I think that's a great idea. Okay guys, so that's it. Sorry to take a few minutes here to cover that task list, but just wanted to make sure everyone's up to date on all of those things going on. Let's cover our terms and get into these charts. Let's go ahead and go over these terms real quickly. Basically, the idea here is that the daily analysis is for educational purposes only. We are regulated by the United States government, who does not allow us to give investment advice without being registered with some kind of authority. So we want to be clear that that's not what's going on. We are just giving you our opinion of the market, so please do understand that. Okay, and now back into these charts. Now, we talked about yesterday just going over the trade setups idea, but of course that's kind of nullified for the weekly analysis because it's not really about trade setups. It's more about just getting a longer view of the market. So on Fridays, we'll still just basically be covering the major pairs or any other pairs that you guys might request ahead of time and going over the view of the market. One thing that's important to note on the Euro-Dollar weekly chart is that it's about 3 weeks hanging out in between these levels. So we did get some bursts all the way back down, to 128.85 is basically where I have this level, but overall still hanging in between this area. And so the potential for this to be actually the continuation of a downtrend is still very much in play, a very long-term, obviously, downtrend. However, right now it's just in a point of struggling, which happens. You can see here was another area where price struggled in the same zone for quite some time. Here was an area where price struggled in between the next zone. And so what you'll see is that price oftentimes, as it's bouncing between these zones, has areas where it struggles, even a few bars on the weekly chart struggling in this area. And that's just how the market works. It moves quickly, then it kind of slows down and rests, and then it moves quickly again. So right now, we're in an area that is struggling between these two zones, and it's just a matter of breaking. And not to point out the obvious, but there's two very significant potentials here. Number one is that this is a pullback, and we're continuing this recent up move. Okay, that would be assumed if it breaks to the upside very strongly. And then the opposite, if we're if this is a deep correction into this downtrend, and that we're in fact continuing the longer term downtrend. I don't have a strong opinion on which one it is, and quite frankly I do not care, because I'm not trying to predict the market, just trying to take advantage of it when it does move. And so the euro dollar is a case where we could get a break in either direction, and I'm totally fine with whatever way it goes. But my advice is to have these levels clearly drawn and to take advantage when it makes its move up. A lot of times it'll fake one way and go the other way, so you have to be careful with these levels. Just having them is not going to get you into winning trades. You still have to be very careful and discretionary about your trading, but they do give a much clearer idea of what's going on than just kind of trying to figure out the charts with a few indicators or something like that. So having these levels clearly defined, in my opinion, is really the best way to try to forecast the market in the sense of jumping on it as it moves. You know, when it's bouncing in between a level, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, so don't take it, too seriously. But in my opinion, it's just kind of flipping a coin to try to say, oh, it's going to, the potential is for it to break up. I say, why not let it make its break and then try to jump on as it's moving from that break to the next area where it might settle, and that is the way I trade. So that's the euro dollar weekly chart. Again, two obvious potentials there, so beware of those areas, and we'll keep tracking them, and when it breaks, we'll be the first to act. Alright guys, next we have the pound dollar, which is bouncing very nicely on the weekly chart from this area. And this actually reminds me of yet another thing I wanted to address in the analysis, and that is that I've got some questions about trading counter trend. And so I want to address that. I think it's a really important note. And I'll try to answer it as best I can, although like a lot of things in trading, there's very relative ways to look at things. So what I'll do is I'll try to answer it the best I can, and then if you guys need some follow-up explanation, just let me know and I'll go into more detail. But the way that I view it is that I don't like to trade counter trend, quote unquote, where I'm trying to trade it like before the market reverses, trying to jump it in the opposite direction. However, when movement is bouncing upward, for instance, after a really strong weekly bar like this last week's bar, to me that's an obvious point in the market where price is bouncing probably toward another level, which is this level right here. And so even though there's recent movement down, I'm not going to ignore that movement, but I'm very much okay with getting into a long position as price bounces. Yes, it can be considered counter trend, although I'd say the market overall is still sideways, but yes, it can be considered counter trend, especially when you're looking at a daily chart. But it's not, I'm not like, jumping to the market as it's crashing against me. I'm actually jumping in the direction that it's moving, depending on exactly how or what time frame you're looking at. But I'm trying to jump into a long as it's bouncing up. And to me, that's not like ignoring the trend and just making a stupid trade. To me, that's taking advantage of a movement in the market that is showing momentum and is clearly bouncing off one area and clearly heading toward another area. So when I said that I got long earlier on pound and got stopped out by this wick that you see here, people said, why were you long in the pound? The pound is moving down. Well, the reason I was long on the pound is because it started bouncing, it started rejecting this recent down move and bouncing with momentum in a clear area. It didn't just stop in a random area. It didn't stop here where I wouldn't have a reason to believe that it was bouncing. It stopped right on a nice level and was heading right into a nice level. And so to me, when I can jump on a trade, say, I put my target or my entry here, my target here, my stop right below my entry, and I can get in on a 1-to-4 or 1-to-5 risk to reward ratio where I only have to get 20% of these trades right as it's bouncing, to me that's a great high probability trade that I should be taking advantage of regardless of if this move is happening down. And just so you know, I got back long on the pound because of this bounce and hit my target today because we had a pretty bullish day on the pound and ended up making a lot more than what I lost. Okay, so to me, these are good trades regardless of the fact that there is, a technical move down here, that it may be considered against the overall trend, but I'm not considering that a counter trend trade. I'm considering that a trade with the, in the rhythm of the bounce of the market heading toward a good area. Okay, guys, so I hope that makes sense. I got a few questions about that. I want to be clear. I'm not a counter trend trader. I like trading with the trend. But if the market's bouncing from one zone to another zone, it's making a clear technical bounce, I'm very okay with trying to jump in for part of that bounce and capture some profit if I can get in with a good risk to reward ratio. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. If you guys are curious about that and would like more explanation, just let me know. Okay, so with that being said, again, obviously with the pound, what I'm looking at are all the levels I have in red here. There are more zones than just these lines, but the lines make it a little simpler to look at. I have 4 here. Price bounced off this one, heading toward this one. What I'll look for is either a bounce back down, again, to continue this downward movement. I think that's a nice continuation potential there. Or if it breaks, I'll look for it to go toward this level, and I'll continue to be okay with going long on the bounce of the market, especially because we're in a pretty sideways market, not really a straight downtrend there. All right, so that's the pound. Again, looking at these levels and think that there's a lot of potential here for trades if the pound continues to move nicely. I just noticed, guys, I'm sorry, I just noticed that I had the daily label up here. No, this is not the daily. This is the weekly chart. Wow, I'm sorry if that caused any confusion. Weekly chart. So weekly, not daily. These are weekly moves, not just one random day that's turning, in case you got confused about that. So that kind of adds a little more validity to the idea of the market bouncing. But anyway, I will make sure that all my labels are correct from this point on in the video. So sorry about that. Alright, guys, and next we're moving to the AUD, another pair that's bouncing. And by the way, just for your reference, I asked Tony if I should restart the video because of my last mistake, and he said no. So if you're very upset about that, just send an email to Tony. It's his fault. But anyway, we're in this small sideways market here, smaller channel within the larger channel here. And it's actually kind of a wedge more in the longer, but we're bouncing up toward this 105 area, and the momentum has been pretty good. This last week was really strong. We kind of had a center here where it squared up with the last candle, and it's now continuing to move nicely. And so the odd long potential that we talked about all the way down here is really following through nicely in this sideways market. If you're a range trader, this odd is really great. I particularly don't love range trading, although that does give opportunities when the range is as big as this one, because the range is about 400 pips. So there's still a lot of opportunities there. But those of you guys who really like the ranges, playing the tops for sells and the bottoms for buys, the odd is moving nicely and is continuing this bounce. Hopefully some of you are still in from all the way down here and making profit on that trade. Alright, guys, next I have up this USCAD weekly chart, and this is kind of one that's been frustrating, beat me up a little bit, because just when I thought it was going short, it bounced here. Before I thought it might be breaking long, it bounced down. So a little bit of a tricky situation, but what it looks like to me is that it's continuing to respect this level, and of course this trend line level here, and then it does want to push back down. A somewhat bullish week, even though it's retraced toward the end of the week. Still a somewhat bullish week. But I think it maybe a center up here, and it really does want to move down. I'm going to wait on this one, but if it breaks lower, I think I'll probably be prone to get back short on USDCAD. And by the way, this is a good example of the kind of perspective thing or relativism within trading, because the market's moving clearly up here recently, over several weeks, and so shorts in this area would possibly be considered counter trend trades. Yet really, it's a trend line that's going down, and you're playing it off a bearish trend line, which is the opposite, of course, of a counter trend trade when you're trading back into the continuation of a trend line. Yet, if you're looking at it from this perspective, oh, that's a counter trend trade. So that's one of the reasons I don't really put too much weight on the idea of trend trading and counter trading in their respective definitions. I trade more with, okay, the momentum of the current market moving while still using the long-term view. And so just a good example there of the perspective idea and the relativism in trading, and really how you define what counter trend and trend is. It totally depends on what you're looking at and how you're assuming that. So anyway, USDCAD, this level is a little minor level within the daily chart, and this trend line is a pretty solid weekly trend, and to me looks like it's fighting here and wants to break down, but we'll wait on that. I'm not going to make that assumption ahead of time. That's what it looks like to me right now, but I'm going to wait and see what price action actually confirms, and then look to take advantage of the trade from there. Okay, guys, next I have the Euro Pound Weekly, and you can see that we're breaking out of this area. What I'm actually going to do is change this now that the market's moved out. I'm just going to consider this top area kind of this little resistance area up here, and now that we're out of this zone, I'm going to kind of change my perspective and just say this is resistance, and anything in here is maybe channeling, but it's not a complete zone, if that makes sense. So what we're looking at here is that the market looks like it's trying to break down. We have a fib level here that does not correspond extremely heavily with historic price, so I'm not sure if this is a major level in your eyes, but for me it's not a huge level. The next one, the 38.2 of that swing, is a little bit heavier level, and so this is an area where I think price could come into. Now that depends on a lot of factors, but technically speaking, you could maybe consider this an area because price turned around here during this week and say, okay, if it breaks that, I'll look to get short. Really depends on what your perspective is here. But my target would probably be up. 83 is a round number, so I probably want to target a little bit above 83, maybe 83, 10, and try to get this short if there's some momentum there. As I mentioned yesterday, I'm not 100% confident, in this euro pound. I don't know what it is. It's not that there's not bearishness here. You can see two pretty good weeks of bearishness. It's just the shape of the market and kind of how it's hanging up in this 86 area that it's not a nice clean round where it just started heading back down. It's just kind of ugly. And so I don't know what it is, but I just don't like the formation here. I just want to wait and get some really clear direction on the euro pound. I think that the potential's there, but I'm just not yet ready to trade it. And so totally depends on what your perspective is. I know I had some comments. People said, "Hey, I am ready to trade it." Hopefully, you're in good trades there, or at least set up for good trades. To me, I'm just not quite there based on my own personal opinion, and I'm waiting on this euro pound a bit longer. All right, guys. Next up, I have this US yen weekly chart, which I think is setting up for some great potential. It could be a bearish break of like a triple level here. You have kind of this base that it built heading up this way, the horizontal area here that's pretty strong, and also this trend line here. So basically, in my opinion, triple support in this 94.50 area. If it breaks down here, especially if it breaks and retests this area, I'm all the way sure on this. Would not hesitate to jump on short. Set up a trade with the trailing stop, no target, and just see if this thing would run down. Very likely it wouldn't. It would come down a little bit lower, test 92, and shoot back up. But if the reversal potential sets up here, I'm not going to deny myself the chance to get into a 1 to 10 or a 1 to 20 risk to reward trade. Why not put some money on the line for that great profit potential? Again, depending on your definition, could be counter trend, especially when I use the word reversal. But recent movement is down. There's momentum to the downside in this area. So to me, that is not a counter trend trade, unless you're just looking at the weekly chart and saying, oh, trend's up, shorts are counter trend. Okay, fine, and then it's counter trend in that area. But if you're looking at maybe a 4-hour chart and there's all this bearish momentum, I would not consider that a counter trend trade. So yeah, just dealing with that yet again. But anyway, this is a huge level around 94.50. The bottom of the level, I would say around 93.90. A break, move back and continuation could be a great reversal potential. And again, if you're getting in here maybe, and you have a stop loss above this zone, your stop area is going to be this big, and your potential profit is unlimited. Maybe it comes to like a 50 retracement, maybe it comes lower, maybe it goes all the way down to the previous low. Who knows? Maybe it shoots up and stops you out for a loss. That's very possible too. But just talk about profit potential and trades that are worth putting some money on the line. To me, the US yen is one of them. Now that's the downside, of course. Being at triple support, there's a lot of upside potential. Because of all these things collaborating at once, where it could easily bounce to a higher high. We could have a move, a pullback, and a continuation, and I certainly would not hesitate to take a long position here either. So again, a situation where long and shorts are both very possible. And we talked about the 100 area, as a lot of people think, hey, maybe 100 is a good price that US yen might go to, just from a psych basis. And I think that's possible. So wouldn't hesitate to take a long either. But I love that the US yen is in a great area where a potential trade could be coming at any time. All right. I think that's it for the analysis. There's a couple other weekly charts that are interesting, but we've already gone about 20 minutes, so I don't want to bore you too much. And if you would like me to cover any other charts on a weekly basis, I really could go back Monday and still look at the weekly charts. That wouldn't be a big deal. So just let me know with a comment if there's anything else that you'd like to look at on a longer time frame. Guys, I appreciate, as always, you checking the analysis out. If you're still with me after this extended version of the analysis, then you're a real daily analysis fan, and I appreciate that. And I will certainly be talking to you Monday.